Hello and welcome to the podcast Mindset, Money, Success. And I'm your host, Loraine Marshall. And today, what I want to do is go over a chapter from a book that I published. I published that book in a pen name, Loraine Keeling. And the reasons why I published that book. So this podcast is a little bit different from my usual podcast because I'm just going to read out the chapter, one of the chapters from that book. I have now been living in Spain for 8 years, and for the last 4 years of my life, I have been involved in conflict, mostly coming from the other party, because I never wanted conflict. All I wanted was what was promised, and he went back on all the promises that he made. 50% of the value of the property, that I could buy him out at 50% of the value of the property. But then as soon as, well, even before he left, I was threatened and intimidated and made to feel that it was all my fault and that I was the guilty party. And he was the one who was being victimized. And I was called a loser, and that it shows me up for the loser that I am, was the words that he used. And there was another phrase that he basically was angry and aggressive. And one of the phrases that was listened to in the police station and then reported in the gender violence complaint that I made, when I'd said it was emotional and psychological abuse. Actually, when I made that police complaint, I was in a complete state of grief and shock, and being told by a Spanish lawyer to actually file a complaint was not what I wanted to do. And I remember asking that lawyer on that day, can you not just write to his solicitor? And that lawyer repeated one of the phrases that he'd said in a recorded meeting that we'd had, supposedly to discuss the financial proposal I had written and the financial proposal he had written. Only he wasn't able to discuss anything in a friendly way. And actually, I wasn't able to discuss anything of my proposal because he shut down the conversation from my side and I wasn't able to speak. And so this solicitor had said to me, "Did you not hear what he said? You can't negotiate with him." The solicitor was right. I couldn't negotiate with him, but he was a lawyer and he was a solicitor and he was advising me to file a complaint of gender violence. And he could have negotiated on my part, but he was the one that wasn't listening. Because obviously I wanted him to write to the other solicitor, the opposition solicitor, and start negotiations. And I've since discovered over the 4 years of being in this situation that a lot of solicitors, a lot of lawyers out there don't understand what it is to be in a situation of emotional and psychological abuse. And when you ask them for help, they turn around and say, it's very difficult to prove emotional and psychological abuse. And that basically is a cop out. They shouldn't actually give you advice to file a gender violence complaint and then leave you to get on with it. Because when I rang the helpline, which is a national helpline in Spain, they told me, before you go to the police station, you need to have a lawyer, right? You need to have someone at the police station before you put the complaint. I didn't have a lawyer. I tried and I didn't get a lawyer. So I went to the police station on my own after actually writing to the opposition solicitor first, to see if he would help to smooth things over and to actually cooperate, do some negotiation, but he wouldn't. He basically then blamed me and said there was an offer on the, but there wasn't an offer because nothing had been given and nothing had been signed, and we were in the process of talking things through, but there was no conversation. So basically, when I'd gone to the office in the Guardia Civil, what happened was I asked for a lawyer, and 2 times I was told I didn't need to have a solicitor or a lawyer. And so made this statement with just the help of a translator who could translate between English and Spanish. And so when that complaint went in, the only thing that was considered when I was appointed another lawyer, a free lawyer, who turned up 30 minutes before the first gender violence hearing court, the only thing that was considered was a case of one minor verbal abuse. And I didn't know what was happening until it was March, I think, 2021, when I got the sentence from the court after the second hearing in January, and the case had been dismissed because they didn't consider the phrase as one minor verbal abuse. And then the judge blamed me again. So the phrase that was uttered was, they're not going to tell you that you look like a bleeding heart post-menopausal sad old bitch that's just been dumped on her own again. That was the phrase that appeared in the document that was written up in the Guarda office, and that was submitted to the court in October 2020, then again in the January of 2021. And that's how obviously then the case was dismissed, because his lawyer turned up as power of attorney. My free lawyer didn't ask for any further information, didn't ask for any evidence, didn't ask anything else. It was taken as one minor verbal abuse. After that sentence was given to me, I then forwarded to the original solicitor who had heard the information, who had given me the advice to file the gender violence complaint. And that lawyer then said, you need to appeal because they haven't looked at it as a longer case of bad behaviour. And at that point, I went back to the free lawyer to say, what do I do now? I should appeal. And that lawyer said, my job is done. You need to find another lawyer. So I was pushed back all the way back to the beginning of the process to try and find another lawyer or to try and negotiate something. And so from the frustration, from everything that happened post-separation, and then the realization of everything that happened during the relationship that I didn't understand at the time, but then then realized throughout the time that I was here alone what had gone on. That's why I started to write the book, in order to protect the legal professionals and in order to protect my former partner. I wrote the book under a pen name, and then I changed the names of the people in the book, and I promoted that book via a website which had my pen name and it was called, the website still online, and it's lifechangeplans.com. And I opened up a YouTube channel and called it Life Change Plans. And also I have some other, like a Twitter X account and a Medium account, and it's all in the name of Life Change Plans. So the idea was that I was actually protecting the people that were in the book. The reason of writing the book was to raise awareness of the situation, and it was nothing to do with actually causing a defamation of anyone, because that's not what I'm about. And anything that I've written online is never, like, apart from a couple of times, it never included names of the people involved. So this is one of the chapters that I wrote from my first published book. And I am going to republish this book in the next month, because it's coming up to the 4th anniversary of the termination of the relationship. And so I'm going to relaunch the book again. So this is a chapter from my book, and it's called COVID Lockdown in Spain, March 2020. And I start with the end of 2019. So, confidence restored, trusting and believing. Chapter from my first self-published book, 2019. Took me a number of months to feel better about myself after the terrible year of him and his double lifestyle and his Wednesday girl ego trip. There were still some periods of uncertainty, but Philip had told me he wanted to be with me and would work for just another 12 to 18 months in the UK. He wanted to earn more so he could top up his retirement pot. I didn't know what was in his bank accounts, how much he had saved, or even if he had a ton of debts. It was something that he never spoke to me about. I know that he worked in the UK at various companies, and he was telling me he was making a lot of money. He expected to be able to put another 100,000 into his retirement fund, telling me it was so that we could be secure in our retirement here in Spain. By mid-2019, I had started to enjoy a few activities on top of the activities I was already involved in. I was going to yoga class and joined an art class. Then I was invited to dance practice in November to prepare for the Cartagena Carnival. This was the first time I had ever been involved in a carnival before. I also enjoyed the sunshine, the pool, the hot tub, and working hard in the garden. By the end of 2019, I was beginning to think everything was going to work out between us. 2020. When the Spanish government announced the COVID-19 pandemic, it was shortly after my 59th birthday in March. I had enjoyed a party with friends we had invited to our home, and then a day or so later, we had a lovely meal in a restaurant. Then all of a sudden, we were being instructed that restrictions were coming into force. Of course, Philip made a quick decision not to return to the UK on the flights he had booked. He didn't want to leave me alone in Spain, and he didn't want to be alone in the UK either. I remember that he seemed worried. Just as the announcement was made, he decided that we should go shopping that evening. He even instructed me to put my passport and ID card in my handbag just in case we were stopped at any roadblocks. We decided to shop in the largest supermarket in Portamatharon. Of course, there were no roadblocks, and we did not see any local policia or Guardia Civil on our way there. We stocked up on all sorts of long shelf life foods. Obviously, he was thinking that the lockdown restriction could last a long while. Little did we know right then just how long the situation would play out. During the lockdown, Philip decided that we could make a few improvements around the villa. So it started with an A3 size drawing pad where he sat me down with coloured pens and we started to brainstorm ideas of things that needed to be done and things that we would like to do. That document became our working plan for all sorts of DIY projects that were taken care of one by one from March through to June. We painted the entrance gate, changing the colour from black to blue, repainted the light fittings on the gate posts and the double garage to match. Philip also ordered air conditioning for 2 of the bedrooms. Then my idea for a wooden fence came into being when he purchased the wood and built the fence with the help of a friend and neighbour. Bit by bit, we did things to make the place better. My other idea of creating paths and planting on the land at the top tier also took shape, as Philip ordered gravel, sand, and paving slabs before he left for the UK in July. I worked on that project alone with the help of a neighbour who had an electric barrow. He helped to move the heavy slabs and the sand up to the top deck so I could get on with the idea I had to transform the plot of land. It was June 2020, in the middle of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown. I had been out that morning, and when I returned home after an art class, he obviously didn't hear me coming in the kitchen door. He was sitting in the front porch, and I could hear that he was talking to someone on his iPad. At first, I thought he was talking to one of his sons. However, I heard him saying, "Loraine is very insecure." And then I thought, what? Am I insecure? In the next breath, he went on to tell this person how he had arranged his Spanish and UK wills, even telling the person that he was leaving the Spanish house to me and the boys would inherit the UK property he had. When I went through to the porch, he looked up and very quickly ended the conversation, telling the person he had to go as Loraine was home. I never let on about the part of the conversation I just overheard, but I knew he was not talking to one of his boys. Besides, he had told them, and also me, what he had planned for his will and his properties during 2016. Later that day, we were both outside swimming and then sitting in the hot tub. I questioned him about who he had been talking to earlier. He then told me his story about how he'd seen some posts on Facebook from an old friend, Harry, and noticed a comment from a woman he knew from Poole. Her name was Delia. Then I realised that he was talking about an old flame from his past. I still did not ask him why he had told the person that he thought I was insecure, or that I heard him telling her about how he'd arranged his Spanish and UK wills. Don't ask me why I didn't want to confront him. This was another one of those moments where I thought it was most likely best not to ask, and again brushed things under the carpet. However, I am unsure if he was talking to Delia, the old flame from the past. Why? Because in January of 2021, his ex-wife, Jenny Holby, now Lambert, connected to me via Facebook Messenger to supposedly find out if I was okay after she had realised the relationship had ended. She saw that his UK property was up for sale and apparently found out through her daughter, who is still connected to his 2 boys, and she said she doesn't do Facebook much. So in one Facebook message, she mentioned that I had walked in on a Skype call that he was having with her. She didn't say when it was, even though I questioned her. Was it his ex-wife, Jenny, whom he was talking to in June 2020 before he left Spain for the UK again? Or was it really Delia, the old flame from Poole? Jenny went on to tell me that throughout the 11 years of our relationship, she had conversations and meetings with Philip. Even though their marriage, that lasted 6 months, had ended, their BDSM bond had not. So Jenny tells me, "Thank you for chatting yesterday. It tidied up some emotional loose ends for me." Emotional loose ends. Yet she claimed she had moved on years ago. Ha. The removal van is booked Philip returns to the UK, July 2020. Will I harvest the cannabis? His return to the UK was delayed because of COVID lockdown. So we spent 6 months together in Spain. We had been working on our home, transforming it, fixing things, making improvements. I finally felt that I was leaving behind the terrible memory of the past infidelity, and I started to recover lost self-confidence again. I really enjoyed the dance classes with the other Spanish women and the English neighbour. In February 2020, the big moment arrived. We all happily danced through the streets of Cartagena while taking part in the colourful carnival, with all the wonderful costumes and the music playing loud into the night. It was a lovely family party atmosphere. The music was ringing around my head for days afterwards. I got such a thrill from taking part. Everything seemed to be coming together. We seemed to be getting along fine, apart from that odd conversation that I'd walked in on in June. The removal van was packed. While he was back in the UK, the removal van was meant to happen in April, was rescheduled. He sent me photos of the van packed with all the things he wanted to bring out from the UK property. This included a few items that were mine. The van was due to arrive here in Spain before he was due back, but unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. The removal van broke down twice on the way from the UK to Spain, causing a massive delay. It actually didn't arrive until September. So while Philip was back in the UK, I'm needed here to look after the cannabis plants that he has been growing for months. He asked me to take some photos to send to him, so of course I obliged. I sent him the photos of the plants. Then Philip sends me a message back asking if I could harvest one of the plants. Of course, I'm saying yes to pruning the plants, washing them, hanging them to dry in the games room above the snooker table. Philip delayed his return to Spain by a week. He told me about his plan to visit a therapist in the UK near Cardiff in Wales. This came as a bit of a shock, to be honest. It was the first time he had spoken to me about wanting to have any sort of therapy. Reasons why I've written this book: to raise awareness of the hidden emotional, psychological abuse that can happen in relationships, highlighting the gaps in the laws and how the system can fail those who need protection, how the laws in relation to separation of couples who are cohabiting are not fit for purpose, how cohabiting couples do not have the same legal rights as married couples or those in civil partnerships, to show how, after the end of a relationship, abuse can continue in what can be termed post-separation abuse, when one party in the relationship chooses conflict over discussion and negotiation, how the legal system can be abused by the offender, further to cause emotional and financial devastation to the victim. Emotional and psychological abuse comes under the term coercive control in the UK, a law that was passed in March 2015 and came into force on the 29th of December 2015. Victims of abuse often know that what has been happening to them isn't right, but they didn't understand or don't understand that it is domestic abuse and that it is now illegal. For all the women who didn't survive, those who were not able to get through the trauma and gave up on themselves and their future, more needs to be done to raise awareness and protect those who suffer this hidden emotional and psychological abuse. Domestic violence is a factor in up to 1/4 of female suicide attempts. Facts on post-separation abuse. In the year ending March 2020, an estimated 2.3 million adults aged between 16 and 74 experienced domestic abuse. 1.6 million women and 757,000 men. To end this podcast, I will be relaunching this book again on August 27th, 2024, the 4-year anniversary of the abrupt termination of the relationship. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Bye for now.